Hey, welcome. Today we are going to look at returns to a factor and returns to a scale. The timer is on, so let's get going. Number one is there's two areas to returns to a factor and returns to scale, and that is the short run and the long run. So the short run is when we have at least one factor of production which is fixed. Our factors of production are land, labor, capital, and enterprise. So a fixed factor of production could be machinery. I might have something actually. Oh, it's quite heavy. There we go. So that's my fixed factor of production. So if we have at least one fixed factor of production, one that doesn't vary with output, then we can say that it is a short run. However, in the long run, all factors of production are variable, because in the long run we can buy more machinery, we can buy, expand, get more premises, buy more trucks, etc. But in the short run, we can't. We have that limit, which is the machinery we have, the printers we have, and so hence it's called the short run. Now, within the short run, we need to understand productivity and costs. So productivity is, well, how much output can we get out of that machine? And well, how many units of variable do we need to use that machine? So for example, if I have 10 computers, then I need to employ 10 people to work on those 10 computers. And then I'll be maximizing the utility of those computers. And that drives us to this diagram over here. So on the y-axis, we have the marginal product, and that's the extra output I will get by employing one more person. And then we also have the average product, and that's the average output per employee. So first of all, we have this one that kind of goes up and then sharply goes down, and that is because the law of diminishing returns is taking place. So for every machine I have, for every computer I have, for every fixed cost I have, there's a certain level of output, and it might involve we call them in economics units of variable factor, but in reality we're just talking about employees. So how many employees do I need to run my factory, to run my machines? Now, if I have, again, 5 computers and I employ 5 people, great. Then for every extra person I employ, as long as I have computers, then every extra person might be able to produce some more, depending again on, I guess, how qualified they might be. However, I will reach a point that regardless of how qualified they are, if I keep employing people, the output is going to diminish. They're not going to be able to produce, not because they're not qualified, but because there's no capital for them to work with. So I could employ a guy with a PhD, but I might not get anything out from him because there's no capital, no machinery, no tools for him to use. So hence, the marginal output starts reducing. And you can see it go down as you employ more people. So that is the law of diminishing returns. Then we have the other one. It looks a little like more like a rainbow. So it goes up and then down. And that one, this one, that is the average product. The average product is how much is each person producing. And you can see that the highest point of the average product is the point where the marginal product intersects with it. A little bit like playing football, the marginal product is that how many goals you scored on the last match. That'll be your margin. Whereas the average is, well, how many scores have we been scoring on average? Maybe we score 2 goals on average every match. So if our latest match we score 3, then we're bringing up our average. However, if on our latest we score only 1 goal and our average is 2, then we're going to bring down the average. So, but however, when the marginal equals the average product, then we have reached the maximum of our average product. It's like saying we score 2 goals and our average is 2 goals. So we have reached the maximum of our average product. The amount of output we're generating from our employees. So again, we employ people up to the point where we have 5 people in 5 computers. We employ some more, and the output starts diminishing. However, they're still sharing computers, so output is being produced. Yeah, total output is still increasing, and total output will increase until the marginal product reaches 0. Because as long as the marginal output is positive, then the total output will carry on increasing. However, it's increasing at a diminishing rate, because for every extra employee, the output becomes less and less and less. And again, it's not necessarily because they're not qualified, but in this instance, we're assuming it's because there's not enough capital for them to work with. Or that's the assumption when we're looking at the short run, because at least one factor of production is fixed. And that fixed factor of production is our limit, is what's causing the limit on how much our company is producing. If I have a printer and I'm printing t-shirts, just like this one, my limit is, well, how much can the printer do, right? If I cannot go beyond that. And even if I employ more people, well, I'm still not going to be able to make any more. So by employing too many, our average output per employee is going to reduce. And the point where it starts reducing is when the marginal product merges or links or cuts through the average product. That's when it starts reducing. So what does that tell us? Well, it tells 2 things. One is that it tells us until what point we should employ or recruit people if we're looking to be productively efficient. So if our aim, our objective, the business objective is to be productively efficient, then we should employ units of variable factor up to the point where marginal product equals average product. Here the assumption is that the units of variable factor, the employees, are getting paid a fixed wage. So if you're getting paid a fixed wage, then you want to make the most out of the people you're employing. So therefore you'll make the most until that point, until the extra output equals the average output per employee. Any more than that, and the extra output is diminishing, and it'll bring down the average product. So you're not going to get your money's worth out of employees, put it that way. So that happens in the short run. So what happens in the long run? So in the long run, it's when all factors of production are variable. And we have 3 scenarios. The first one here is when the factors of production increase. So if there's a change to all factors of production, so we had a factory printing t-shirts, and now we open a second factory that prints t-shirts. Now, if the output is more than proportionate to the change in the factors of production, then there's an increase in there's an increase in the total output. So we have increasing returns to scale. I know it sounds like a complicated word. I even get confused. So increasing returns to scale is just, we had one factory making 1 pen, then we open another factory that makes 2 pens, giving us a total of 3 pens. So by opening that extra factory, our total, we have increasing returns to scale because our output is more than proportionate. So we have the opposite. We had one factory making 1 pen. Now we open another factory, and the new factory only makes half a pen. So there we have decreasing returns to scale because the total output is reducing, and the increase is less than proportionate in the new factory. So that is decreasing returns to scale. And then we have proportionate returns to scale. One factory makes 1 pen, we open another factory, and that other factory also makes 1 pen. So we have proportionate returns to scale. And that happens in the long run if we open more factories. So we also have, when we look at returns are very much linked to costs. So when we looked at the productive efficient point, we see that this curve, the output that we get per employee, first goes up. We employ more people, and they're producing more because they have machines to produce work with, produce output. However, we reach a point where there's too many people and there's nothing for them to do, So they're just making tea, they're less productive, and it starts going down. So if these people are getting paid a fixed wage, then our cost of production is going to increase when they are not producing as much. So that is how we link it to costs. So in the short run, again, we have our fixed and our variable costs. We have, if you remember on your diagram for fixed and variable costs, fixed costs do not change with output. For example, my wage is fixed every month, regardless of what I'm doing. So if I don't do anything, I still get paid the same wage. So on the other hand, there are variable costs. So if we look at the cost of making bottles, for every bottle they make, they need a little preform. A preform is a bottle, a baby bottle, before it's actually turned into one of those big 500 mils. I think I have one here. So hence the variable cost to make bottles will be a preform. Other variable costs we can think of: caps, labels. Those will be variable costs, and variable cost will increase as the output increases. The more output, the more the variable costs will increase. Now, that's one way of seeing the costs. Now, what if we look at the costs, but we see them per unit? So if we look at the cost per unit, and I'm making one bottle, so hence I have to pay for one preform, one cap, one label, but I also need to pay for the fixed costs, the wages of all those people in that factory and the machinery. So if I only make one bottle and I need to cover my costs, then that's going to be a very expensive bottle. It's going to be a very expensive bottle because there's a lot of costs, especially fixed costs, involved in producing it. So especially the fixed costs are going to be very high for one bottle. However, if I make 1 million bottles, then I can spread those fixed costs. If you think of your teacher, right? If they have a fixed wage, if they teach one person, is the same as they'll get paid the same as if they teach 30. But if they teach 30, then they're able to make the most out of his work because they have 30 students as output. The same way a Coca-Cola factory, if they bottle 1 million bottles a day, then each bottle, the fixed cost per unit will reduce as they're spreading the costs of the machinery, the cost of wages. So fixed costs will reduce with the output. So when we look at our fixed costs per unit, they start reducing. So you can see this line going down like that. We also have variable costs. The variable costs, they stay constant because the more you produce, the more units you will need. You might reduce the variable costs per unit because you get purchasing power. As you buy in bulk, the cost per unit reduces. So you might start getting a reduction in those costs as well. So you start incurring economies of scale, internal economies of scale, and that drives down the costs. Now, when you add the variable cost per unit plus the fixed cost per unit, then you get your total fixed cost per unit. And that is the same as your average cost. Your average cost is the total costs divided by the number of units. So hence you get the fixed cost per, the total cost per unit. So average cost is the same thing as saying the total cost per unit. So we see that in these diagrams, they first go down and then start going upwards. And the idea of them going down is because you incur sort of economies of scale, mechanical, you're making the most out of your machinery, you're spreading those fixed costs. You might get managerial economies of scale. You have a manager, now he's responsible for more people, so hence, but he's still getting paid the same wage, or that's the assumption. So hence you're making the most out of him. So you have managerial economies of scale, and that drives the costs down. But it starts going up, and you wonder, why does it go up? Well, there's a couple of reasons. You can think of these economies of scale. So maybe the business is quite big, and so big that the managers can't control their employees, and hence they're not being productive. So we start getting diminishing returns from the employees. Or maybe they're employing way too many people for the amount of capital they have, for the amount of machinery they have. And they start getting this sort of diminishing return per employee. So hence that drives those average costs up. So that's the assumption of this sort of curve that goes down and then upwards. And going across it, we have our marginal cost. So the difference between both is that the marginal cost is the cost of making an extra unit. So here we have that the marginal cost decreases and then it increases. The marginal cost is, well, how much does it cost me to make one more bottle, one more car, print one more t-shirt? That extra cost, here we have, the assumption is that it increases. And the average cost, so it crosses, the marginal cost crosses the average cost at its lowest point. For the same exact reason why the marginal product crosses the average product at the top. Because when the cost of making an extra unit is higher than the average, guess what? The average is going to start going up. If the marginal cost is below the average, well, it's going to drive the average down. So that's why the point where they meet is the lowest point of the average cost, because when it goes higher than that, then it will start driving the average cost upwards. So again, if you're looking to be productively efficient, that will be the point where the business is productively efficient. And it's very much linked to the units of variable factor. So the number of people you are employing. And that will be your average cost curve for the short run. Now, if you have another factory, then you will have another average cost curve, and that'll be average cost curve 2. And then you can see if you actually gain proportionate returns or increasing returns to scale depending on the output. So this hopefully covers both returns to a factor, returns to scale, and also costs and how they both relate. A little bit longer than 15 minutes. Have a good day. Thank you.